Hi, I'm your host, Jürgen Strauss from Innova.buzz, and I'm really excited to welcome from Los Angeles in California, the USA, of course, to the Innova.buzz podcast today, Chris Hood. Chris is an internationally recognized voice. He's a thought leader and a digital strategist that has over 35 years of experience in the online entertainment and marketing space for TV, film, music, and video games. Welcome to the Innova.buzz podcast, Chris. It's a great privilege to have you as my guest.
Thank you so much. Looking forward to our conversation.
Me too. Me too. Now, you also host the Chris Hood Digital Show, and you work with companies worldwide to help them develop their digital and innovation acceleration strategies. And you're also an author. Your book, Customer Transformation, kind of delves into all of those areas and outlines your thoughts and strategies. So I'm really looking forward to exploring all of that with you today. Now, before we get into those things, what impact do you hope to make in the world, Chris?
What impact do I have? Well, I think writing is a great passion of mine, and hopefully I can write something that leaves a lasting impact on others. And I hope that people can pick up something and it helps. I think ultimately at the end of the day, I'd like to help organizations grow and be successful. I like to help people grow and be successful. And I like to build things. I like to build things that help change the world. So between writing and innovation and sitting down with organizations around their digital strategies, yeah, it's all about advancement and growth and making a difference.
Hmm, wonderful. And I know curiosity is a big part of your approach. It's probably a key value that you have, and exploring and learning, as you mentioned. Um, One of the things you talk about a lot is the integration of the digital world with customer experience. And I know we had a pre chat with some very specific examples. Based on your extensive experience, what do you see as the most common challenges businesses and people face when they kind of look at the digital world and say, okay, how do I get involved in this whole digital space, and how do we bring this into our business and leverage it for the good of the business and for the good of our customers?
Yeah. It's a great question because I think when we think about customers and say customer experience, customer journeys, customer loyalty, customer success, anything on that, hemisphere of customers, and then we think about digital and all of the technologies that are available to us to help us connect with our customers. Most people, most organizations will actually start with the digital conversation first. They'll start
Hmm.
with the technology. Oh, this is a really cool technology. Let's use it. And maybe we can figure out a way to share this with our customers. Or, hey, this is a great technology. Let's leverage this technology to enhance our customer experience or anything like that. The problem is that it's actually the wrong way to go about it.
Hmm.
When we start with that technology or that digital first, then we lose sight ultimately of what the customer wants. And so I talk a lot about that convergence, but I talk about it from the sense of you've got to start with your customer first, understand what their needs, aspirations, challenges, problems that you want to solve, and then figure out what technology will help you meet those needs and solve those problems. But if you start with the technology first, and granted, the technology is the fun thing. The technology is the shiny new object that is out there. Artificial intelligence. Ooh, that looks great. Let's use it. And then you miss the opportunities of actually serving your customers. So you've always got to start with customer first, figure out what their needs and problems are, and then leverage the technology to solve that problem.
Hmm. Yeah, that's to me that's such common sense, but common sense isn't all that common, I guess. Uh, and I'm always astounded when I go online to access some information where I'm having difficulty as a customer, or if I get on the phone. to call somebody, which usually I'm only doing if I'm having a problem. And I'm always astounded at the responses and how frustrating they are as a customer. And I always wonder, do these people ever actually step into the customer's shoes and actually go on the customer journey and figure out, what is it that the customer experiences when they use this technology in particular?
Yeah, I mean, it's so simple, and yet sometimes I think we overcomplicate it. Right?
Hmm.
We are all consumers. Every single person who acts in a capacity of customer support or customer service or customer experience, you yourself are a customer.
Yeah.
And for some reason, when we get into work, we lose that mindset of, hey, well, wait a second, what would I do if I was in the exact same situation? And we focus so much on what we think we want to do for our business. And I think that disconnect leads us to these frustrations that we often talk about. I mean, you get onto a call and you're trying to get customer support and answer a question, and they've got a book of how to answer the
Hmm.
questions. The empathy element of that is completely removed. And again, if the roles were reversed, you as the customer service agent would have the exact same frustrations. And yeah, I'm the same way. It's amazing to me that we can't just put aside that mindset for one moment and step into the customer's shoes as if we were the customers ourselves and go through that process and ask the same questions and identify the same problems and the frustrations and then fix it. I mean, it's one thing to say that we recognize what the problems are. It's a completely new problem when we get to fixing it, which a lot of organizations also don't do.
Yeah, yeah. Well, what's a better way to go about incorporating this and building a digital strategy that is focused on the customer and solving customer problems?
Well, as we just talked about, you've got to start with what the customer problem is. You can't build a digital strategy without knowing what the problem is that you're solving for. And you start by asking questions like, what yeah, I mean, it could be as point blank as
Yeah.
what is the
What's the
problem that
problem?
you have? And then try to solve it. But when you start thinking about the needs and the problems and the aspirations, the expectations that consumers have, all of that is data points. All of that is research that you have to go through. And some of it is through polling, some of it's surveys, like directly asking and
Mm.
trying to get that data back and analyzing it to understand what the problems are. Some of it you can get through social media. You can actually start to look at what
Mm.
people are talking about, what they're complaining about. Look at reviews. When you go and you look at a review, you're going to see some really good reviews. You're going to see some bad reviews. All of that is learning opportunities for you to better understand how you can start solving this. So then, once you have that picture of what the customers are looking for, then you can start to figure out what the strategy is. How are we going to solve this? What are the products that we need to put in place? What are the gaps that we have? What are the new services that we can introduce to help us in that problem solving process? What are the interfaces? How are people actually engaging with us? How are they going through the journey with us? What are they doing before they reach our business? What are they doing after they leave our business? All of this are questions that you can start to ask and fill in the gaps and answer as part of the process to formulate what your strategy is. But it still always will start with talking to the customer, figuring out what the problem is, and then start asking other questions along the way to formulate what the overall strategy is to be more successful.
Hmm. Yeah, one of the things I see a lot of businesses doing, they say, yeah, we talk to the customer, we figure out what the customer wants, and we think we have a pretty good handle on that, and then they develop a strategy for that. but they don't understand the whole customer journey. It's kind of like a snapshot in time. Here's a problem that a customer has. Here's our product or service that solves that problem. And that's kind of it. And it's like their customer journey is okay, there's some marketing and advertising to bring awareness of the product or service to people that have that problem. And then there's a transaction where
Yeah.
the people buy or subscribe to the service. And that's it. So, talk to us a little bit more about why that's such a bad idea. Bit of a Dorothy Dix question, but how to go about actually understanding a lot more about the customer journey so that it's not just that one-off transaction, but you're actually building a relationship with customers that may be for life.
I think transaction is a great way to look at this because I think a lot of businesses focus on individual transactions.
Hmm.
And it's, well, this problem that we are solving is one transaction. And then you talk about customer support. The customer support is a completely different transaction. I have a problem, and so I'm going to call in, and they're focused on the journey just within that little siloed loop. Same thing with shopping. They come to the website, they put something in the shopping cart, they check out. That's the transaction, and they're focused just on that. They're not necessarily focused on the entire breadth of the entire life cycle and journey and time that they spend with you. Even from reviews, like, thank you for purchasing with us. Would you mind leaving a review? And that's a transaction.
Hmm.
And they're thinking about how to solve the problems within that mindset of that transaction. So for instance, I need more reviews. That's a business problem. So I'm going to figure out a way to ask for more reviews. That's the transaction. And then you get that data in and they're satisfied because that was successful. But when we start to holistically look at this from before they even reach your company to well after they've left your company, that entire life cycle requires a much more detailed understanding of the entire cycle of the customer. And it's even not just the journey. We don't think about journeys in the context of the amount of time that I enter and leave. Let's take a company like Starbucks. Now, you might think Starbucks, the journey is I walk into the store, I place an order for a coffee, I get my coffee, I leave Starbucks and I drink it. That's the journey, right?
Hmm.
And maybe you order it through the Starbucks app on your mobile device, and then maybe you go and you pick it up, and maybe you pay for it with your rewards points or something. But still, that journey is within the confines of the business. But that's not what we do as consumers. In fact, the journey starts well before you've even made the decision to go to Starbucks to order a
Yeah.
coffee. You're driving. Maybe you need to stop to get gas. And while you're at the gas pump, you see an ad, and then you start thinking, oh, wow, I really could use a coffee. And then you make the decision, and maybe you place the order while you're at the gas station. Right. And then when you leave, you're posting a picture of your new latest Starbucks drink on social media and you're talking about it with friends. And, in the case, you might keep it there and warm it up the next morning. Like, there is an entire incredible journey that we all go through, and it's never within the confines of the store itself. And I think, again, a lot of people don't look at it that way. They
Hmm.
simply want to solve that transactional problem that's right in front of them. And usually it's not even a customer problem, it's a business problem that they're trying to solve for.
Yeah.
And you've got to step out of that. You've got to get back to thinking about the customer in the entire process of their daily lives and all of the different ways that they may potentially interact with you and engage with you to really better understand who your customer is and what they want from you when and at what point they engage with you, what could be at any number of different points throughout their day.
Hmm. Hmm. And there's so many touch points on that journey, usually, isn't there, that are often ignored.
Yeah, well, look, think about it like this. When we talk about touch points, even the basic premise of what a touch point is as part of the customer journey mapping exercise, I can tell you, I could look at 100 journey maps right now today by 100 different businesses, and they would basically all look the exact same. And quite honestly, they're all wrong. Because if I asked you the question, okay, imagine that you had to build a journey map that did not require a mobile device or a website, what would that look like?
Hmm.
And again, 100% of those journey maps would disintegrate.
Yeah. Hmm.
We're not using, I mean, yeah, we use our mobile devices and yeah, we use websites, but the concepts of what consumers and how they want to engage with you is evolving. And this goes back to what you were talking about a little bit earlier. The fact is that our daily lives and our expectations and our needs and our problems that we have are constantly changing. And as a result, we as consumers and you as a business must be able to keep up with that ever changing expectation. And that's the problem.
Hmm. So, based on your extensive experience, are there some examples of businesses that do it really well?
Well, there's examples of businesses that do it well in what we would consider good experiences. Like Discover is a great example right now. Discover Card, they have done a great job of managing that human connection, removing the sense of you're just going to be handed off to a robot. That's one of their big differentiations right now. Like when you call us, you're going to talk with a real person
Hmm.
because we as humans like talking to real people. We as humans like having very unique conversations about what our problems are and not about what you think is canned in your script. And so I think companies that are taking that human approach to engaging with their customers are all going to be, much higher on the list. And we see it. The customer satisfaction scores of those businesses that allow human connection are much greater than those that are looking at it from a purely technical or digital perspective, right? Artificial intelligence is not improving your customer service like you think it is.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not. Actually, you are losing business directly result of that. And we see the stats that are coming through that are supporting that. You may be saving money on the operational side of it, but you're losing value from your
Hmm.
consumer perspective. What's more important to you? The life cycle of your consumer or the cost of your operations? And if you say the cost of your operations, then you deserve to lose the business.
Yeah. 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 Good point. One of the things also that you reminded me of, in Australia, there are some companies that highlight not only do you get to speak to a real person, you get to speak to a real person who's in Australia, which is plays to the outsourced call centers that often are in the Philippines or in India. And so when you end up speaking to people there, often there are language barriers, it's hard to understand them. And of course, everything else that we've already talked about, they're operating off a script. And if they're on top of that, you place the language barrier, somebody on a script. So I've been on calls with IT people who've told me just, is your computer turned on? Have you checked the electricity at the wall switch, or the ISP providers are great? Is the cable plugged in? And I kind of explain. I try to explain to them that I'm probably more tech savvy than your average customer. You can skip the script. I will explain my problem to you, and I need you to get back to me and tell me, is there something I can do, or is the problem at your end? Usually the problem's at their end, but they're reluctant to admit that. And layer that on top of somebody where you're having language difficulties speaking and communicating to one another, and it's a total disaster. And so one of the differentiators. Some of the companies here say, well, you get to speak to somebody in Australia, but they're still going to be running off script.
Yeah. I mean, that's like Discover Card. You know, you call up and somebody will answer and say, "Hi, I'm Chris and I'm in California. How can I
Yeah.
serve you today?" Right? Like they're telling you exactly who they are and where they're from. And sometimes you get matched with somebody, who is literally in the same state as you are, just to build that further connection. I think all of that is about making that human relationship a part of the conversation. And when you don't have that, yeah, and I've been there before. I'm a fairly technical person. I've been in technology for almost 40 years now. And I always laugh because I usually know what the problem is. And like to your point, I'll call and they'll go through the script and I'll say, well, no, I know what's happening more than the support person is.
Yeah, yeah,
You go through it and you say, no, I think it's this. Could you and it's like that does not compute on my script. I can't tell you what to, like, hold on, can I get somebody else? So yeah, we get frustrated by that stuff. And again, it doesn't always have to be technical. It could be you calling your bank. And when you call your bank for a basic financial transaction that and you have a legitimate challenge with, no script is going to be able to answer that question. You have to talk to a real person and explain it and go through the process. And then we just get frustrated because we can't reach that real person and we're sitting on our phones, pound,
mm,
pound, pound, zero, operator.
yeah. One of the things you touched on there, and I'm very passionate about this because, like you, I've been in the digital world and kind of at the forefront of new developments all the time because I get excited by shiny toys. But at the same time, I see that people are taking technology and kind of abdicating that human connection to the technology, and they believe that's the efficiency part. Now you mentioned the human touch and the human connection part, and you also mentioned AI a few times now. How can we actually use AI in a smart way, because I believe there are some really nifty ways you can integrate it into business, integrate it into what we're doing, integrate it into customer service, but in a way that we actually enhance that human connection rather than destroy it or dilute it.
Yeah. Well, it's a challenging conversation because look, AI can definitely enhance things, but AI is artificial. That's in the name. It cannot replace a human connection. I would argue that it can't even necessarily enhance a human relationship. It doesn't understand that, right? All it's doing is responding to the input. Um, but I think what we have to start looking at is at what point in time can the artificial intelligence actually support the human connection in terms of like a handoff? So, for example, there are times we want to talk to a human, and there are times when we don't want to talk to a human. You know, I use the simple example of like a password reset. Like, I don't necessarily need to call somebody to do a password reset, and my expectation is that I should be able to just go to the website and press a button and do a password reset. Right? No human connection is needed in that regards. But there are some businesses that are out there that are operating under this type of model, where if you decide you want to cancel your subscription or cancel your
Mm.
membership, you can't do that automatically online. You actually have to then call in and
Well,
talk
yeah.
to somebody who's going to then attempt to try to convince you to stay as a member and offer you a whole bunch of options to stay and discounts. And quite frankly, in that moment, I don't want to talk to a person.
Mm.
I should be able to cancel my agreement right there on the website. And so that becomes a barrier. And it's really interesting to think about it that the same human connection that we want to enhance our experience with a business can also be a
Mm.
hindrance to the relationship. In fact, I often argue that if you are requiring somebody to call in to cancel their membership, you have alienated them so much that they may never want to do business with you again.
Hmm.
Whereas if
Particularly,
you automated that process, the odds of them returning as a customer later, once they may be able to financially support it or something else, has increased. And so when I look at artificial intelligence, it's how can the AI help us better understand the moments by which we want to talk to humans and the moments we don't want to talk to humans. And maybe I can recognize the emotional connection in your voice or in your typing, and there would be nothing better than if I was actually typing with a chatbot and the chatbot said, "You know what? It seems like you might be onto something that I can't handle right now. Let me go grab you somebody and
hmm,
connect you right now."
hmm,
That's intelligence. That's the recognition of how we enhance the relationship without actually replacing the relationship. And if we can think about AI in that capacity, then I think a lot of businesses are going to be a lot more successful in the long run with keeping their customers happy, as well as introducing the technologies to streamline the operations.
yeah, yeah, that's a really great point. And the other side of that, I think, too, could be the person providing the service, the agent, if you like, at the business using AI to replace the script. So rather than a script that says if the customer says yes to this question, go there. If he says no to the question, go there. It's more about, okay, here's the big framework in which you can operate. Um, Here's an AI agent that you can converse with in terms of if problems come up that will access a big database of information and provide feedback on those questions.
Yeah, I mean, you talked about getting a voice that is regionalized. Well, you can have AI interpret what you're asking and then come back with an AI voice in a dialect that it is familiar to you and be able to respond and be able to adapt. But again, I see that as a replacement of a human connection.
Yeah, yeah,
That AI still does not have an empathetic view of who you are or what your real needs are, and is only going to be answering based on the responses. And at some point in time, we're going to recognize that it's not a real person, and we're going to get frustrated, and we're going to go back to hitting the pound and the zeros to try to get past it and get to a real person. So I would argue that until AI actually can interpret your emotions, and there's some argument out there, well, they can, well, yeah, there's some AI that is out there that can now sense when your the volume of your voice increases and the tone of what you're asking. But empathy is about a lot more.
mm,
A great example of this is when I call my bank and I say, "Yeah, hi, I was just in a car accident and I was having this problem, and then the tow truck came, and the first thing the AI is going to say is, "Well, what can I help you with from a finance? I'm a bank, right?"
mm,
And instead of actually just sitting there and listening and saying, "You know what? Wow, I'm really sorry that happened to you. Oh man, that sucks." Like, AI is not going to be programmed to interpret the emotional impact of the story
mm.
that the consumer has, and being able to listen to that story and go along with that story until the customer is ready to actually ask the question that it's called and intended to ask.
Yeah,
That's the gap that we currently are missing with artificial intelligence today. And until that is there, which is 10, 15, 20 years away, all we're doing is appeasing somebody until we can actually get into our script mode, which again, people don't
yeah,
like.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And also in that example, I mean, there's if the person you're speaking to has some decision making authority, the it's quite well, it's a huge opportunity for them to come up with some innovative way to delight the customer in that particular situation that may or may not be related to banking or the specific problem you have. So they could actually say, well, look, we'll advance you $500 on your credit card straight away so that you can go out and organize a hire car or whatever. Now, you may be asking you might have asked a different problem, but in that moment, you're suddenly delighted. And
Yeah. Yeah, I actually use a similar example a lot going back to banking. How many, we'll call them sales or CFOs in the world are sitting there and saying, you know what, in our chatbot, we would like to allow people to say, I'm really sorry, I just got into an accident and I'm going to be late on my payment. Can I get a 30-day extension? And the AI chatbot says, sure, I'll give you the 30-day extension, right? There's a lot of companies out there that would not allow the AI to have that power, especially when it directly impacts financial statements.
hmm,
And yet, I would argue if the AI was smart enough and it could understand and have some sort of guardrails, guidelines as to, yeah, I'm going to give you that $500, or yes, I'm going to grant you, an extension on your bill, or yes, I'm going to allow you to, whatever. If we can get to that point where it's perfectly okay, now I don't have to necessarily talk to a real person. I don't have to call in and say, I can't make my payment this month. What can we do? What are our options? And then go through that entire cycle. This is another example of there are times when I want to talk to a person and there's times I don't want to talk to a
hmm,
person. And if the AI is smart enough to handle all those different scenarios and all the different possible combinations of problems as to why we call in, then great. Now we're on to something.
yeah. Yeah, well, this is fascinating, Chris. I could go on talking customer experience and customer journeys and how the digital transformation, particularly today when AI seems to be taking over the world, as it were, for ages. But I'm just aware of the time. So I think it's a good point now to move on to the buzz, which is our innovation round, the same 5 questions I ask of every guest. And the idea is you'll inspire the listener to go and do something awesome as a result of your answer today.
I love it.
All right. So, what's the number one thing anyone needs to do to be more innovative?
Read, think, think, and ask questions. I mean, that's three things technically, but
Yeah.
I say read because what you will find is as you're reading, not just books, like you can go pick up a copy of my book, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm actually talking about like go thumb through the news. Like every morning when I wake up, I read the news. I flip through and see what the headlines are and see what's going on, because the news is giving you some groundwork for what's happening in the world.
Hmm.
And then you start to see what problems there are. And then innovation is all about solving those problems. That's innovation, solving problems. It is not lightning in the bottle. It is not discovering the next, whatever cure for your cancer. It'd be great, but that's not what innovation is. Innovation is solving problems. Uber disrupted an entire industry. Uber solved the problem. It's not really
Hmm.
innovative. Cars have been around for a long time.
Hmm.
Driving somebody somewhere has been around for a long time,
Yeah.
right? So all of that was solving a problem. So innovation is solving a problem. The more you understand what problems are out there, and you can do that through reading, the better you are to be able to come up with ideas to how to solve those problems. That's innovation.
Hmm. Yeah. No, I like the curiosity piece as well because one of the examples, um, or one of the common features, I think, of a lot of um, innovations that we often quote. So you mentioned Uber and Airbnb is another one that fits in that sort of category. Is people being aware that they had a problem. So if I've got a problem, has somebody else got that problem? Is that a problem that a lot of people face? And if it is my solution that I've worked out for myself, is that something that can help other people? And having that curiosity and thinking about those things in that way, I think is very valuable too.
I'm going to build on that one really quickly because it's one thing to say, I have a problem. So great. If I have a problem, maybe some other people have a problem. The validation that you have to do in there means that you have to go out and actually explore if other
Yeah.
people have that problem. And here's the tip: your parents are not validation. I think a lot of times as entrepreneurs, we're like, "Well, I have the problem.
Yeah.
Oh, mom, here's the problem. Do you, what do you?" They're going to say, "Yeah, sounds like a great idea."
Yeah.
That's not validation for you. You've got to actually go out and talk to more than your immediate circle to validate if they have the same problem you do.
Hmm. That's right. Yeah. Of course, uh, your immediate circle, if you do have people that can that are confident enough to give you an honest opinion, that's a good place to start. So if you've got somebody that's likely to say, "No, that's a bad idea," without damaging that relationship, that's always a good filter to start with.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. What's the best thing you've done to develop new ideas?
Yeah. I talk to a lot of people.
Hmm.
Yeah. I mean, I think the premise for me is, here's a problem, here's what I think is the solution, and then talk to a lot of people to validate if that's genuine or not. And then there's an iteration process. So I think the talking helps you iterate on the idea, and sitting down and having the conversation. And if somebody says, no, that's stupid, then yeah, okay, great. Let me think about that some more and go talk to somebody else. Have you thought about this? So those small adjustments and having those conversations is really the best thing for me. It's the constant evolution of the idea to really lock it in and make sure that you're onto something.
Hmm. And talk to real people to get
Yeah,
to get
yeah.
ideas from
Hey,
real
look,
people.
you could talk to ChatGPT right now.
Yeah.
That's one voice. Like, feel free, go put in your idea in ChatGPT. Say, hey, I'm looking for advice, and see what they come back with.
Hmm.
It's great. It's another sounding board for validation of your idea. But you do ultimately need to go and talk to real people, because real people have
Yeah.
problems. AI doesn't have
Yeah.
problems in the
Yes.
traditional.
That's right. Yeah. And unless you're selling something to AI, that's probably only a very limited data point, right?
I've said that as well. We're not building AI to sell to other AI. Like, AI is not our customers, and AI are not our agents. Like, we're not AI is not having transaction, not yet, and we hope that doesn't happen. But yeah,
Yeah.
you're still ultimately selling to a human.
Yeah. Wonderful. All right. Well, we've talked a lot about AI. What's a favorite resource of yours that you use often?
A favorite resource. Geez, I mean, I kind of go back to the news, like,
Hmm.
and not, we're not talking about like news on TV. Legitimate written news, I think is still a viable resource. Social media, Instagram, like micro learning, going through and just watching videos where I can learn stuff. Like, one of the things I'm on right now is a lot of farm life. Like, somebody who's raising snakes, another one who builds aquariums, somebody else who has these really fascinating gerbil farms and hamster farms. Like, I didn't even know this stuff existed. Like, I mean, I've explored a lot of areas, but just seeing what people are doing in the world and what they're creating. And so farm life right now, for some reason, is chickens and raising chickens. I watched this one woman who has a chicken farm, and she has rainbow colored chicken eggs
Oh,
that she
wow.
then puts out and sells to people. Like, I mean, that's fascinating stuff. That's all, and it just gets my mind going. I also love reading fiction. So,
Mm,
I mean, if you look at like Star Trek from a fiction perspective, think about
mm.
how many things we've invented because somebody created it in a movie. I
Yeah.
mean, that's also part of the innovation process. Be stimulated, go do and read and watch as many different things as possible, because it's all inspiration for you.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And we joke a lot about our smartwatches and using them as phones. And we say, well, you remember, now this may be before your time, but I remember
Tracy.
when Dick Tracy, when I was a kid, exactly, Dick Tracy. And then there was the shoe phone and Get Smart, which
Yeah.
was kind of
Yeah.
like that precursor to Well, it wasn't a smartphone, but it was a mobile phone. Hmm.
Absolutely. Those are things that we can look at and start to predict, like what could we possibly build in the future,
Hmm.
and what does it solve? It still has to go back to what does it solve, but
Yeah,
yeah, those are all resources for anybody to really engage with.
wonderful. All right, now what's the best way to keep a project on track?
Oh, yeah. Here you go. Artificial intelligence can help you keep things on track. So,
I thought you might say that.
yeah, that's actually one good thing that AI can do. For me, it's using different types of tools, spreadsheets, services like Confluence that are out there that help you with documentation. So yeah, really, it boils down to documentation. Just document out what you want to work on, build the spreadsheets, figure it out. You know, put put stakes in the ground in terms of what your deliverables are and when you need to deliver them, and follow it. Don't try to adjust it too much, but give yourself some flexibility in terms of, look, if you don't reach a goal, that's fine. Push it out. Agile, when we talk about software, agile development, scrum practices, anything that is an iterative basis, 1 week, 2 weeks, continuously look at it, continuously adjust, and continuously, try to meet your expectations.
Hmm. Yeah, wonderful. And yes, manipulating data is certainly one of the strengths where AI can be used and can help. Right. So, all right. And final question of the buzz round: what's the number one thing anyone can do to differentiate themselves?
Be you.
Hmm.
Be you. I mean, don't try to be somebody else. Be you. Be authentic. Figure out what your voice is. You can tell from our podcast conversation, I have probably a unique voice. I have a unique spin on a lot of things, and I try not to sugarcoat things, and I try to give, some different perspectives, right? That's a voice. That's a voice that I have evolved over several decades. So, but figure out what your voice is, figure out what your perspective is. Don't try to please everyone. You're never going to please everyone.
Hmm.
Have an opinion, and talk about that opinion. And we're not talking about, say, political opinions here, or controversial opinions, but have an opinion on AI. If you believe AI is going to change the world, then great. Explain to me why you think that. And then be prepared to listen to somebody else say it's not
Argue
going to be,
against it. Yeah.
right? And take that back and part of that, right? But the best thing that you can ever possibly do is be authentic and be yourself.
Hmm. Yes, that's everyone else's taken, right?
Yeah.
Was that
Yeah.
Dr. Seuss that said that?
It's a great quote.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Well, thanks for getting us through the buzz round. Now, where can people find out more about you, Chris, and get a hold of your book, listen to your podcast, and maybe even reach out and say thanks for what you've shared today?
Yeah. So the best way to get in touch with me is on my website. And you can reach that at chrishood.com, CHRISHOOD.com. And on my website, you can find my book, you can find my podcast, you can find my blog, and you can find all my social media channels. So if you want to reach out and connect, feel free to do so. And everything, again, right there, chrishood.com.
Excellent. Well, that's easy to remember, but we will include the link in the show notes as well. Finally, then, Chris, what action would you like our listener to take out of our conversation today?
Well, the big one is what we started with. Remember that the customer is always first, and you are a customer.
Yeah.
And I think if you just take away the simple concept that you yourself are a customer and think about how you would feel and apply that into your own businesses, I think all of us would be a lot happier.
Hmm. Wonderful. Yeah. Great call to action. Um, we're all customers as well as whatever role we have in whatever organization we're in. And I'd even add to that that within organizations, each of us is a customer of somebody else in that organization, um,
Yeah.
which I remember. Um, highlighting that lots when I was still in the corporate world, and when we got people starting to embrace that concept, that made a huge difference in how departments operated with one another.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for the conversation today, Chris. I've really enjoyed this, and all the best for the future. And please do stay in touch.
I appreciate it so much.